What does it take to save 2 million lives? The question hangs in the air as we look back at one quiet man's extraordinary journey. He wasn't a soldier on the battlefield, a doctor curing disease, or a scientist in a lab, at least not in the dramatic sense we imagine. His weapon was simply kindness, and his sacrifice was nothing more than needles and time. This is the story of James Harrison, an Australian blood donor, so dedicated that his rare blood gave life to millions of babies. It was 2025 when the world learned that James Harrison had died at 88 Inch, a nursing home in New South Wales. By that time, he was already being called the man with the golden arm. A hero, not for wielding a weapon, but for the gift in his veins. The headline summed it up simply: one of the world's most prolific blood donors, whose plasma saved the lives of more than 2 million babies, had quietly passed away. In a sense, he had already become an almost mythical figure, the guy whose needle stops heartache. Today we'll tell his story from the beginning, scene by scene, with all the drama and heart of a great film.
Lens Docs.
James grew up in a small town in New South Wales. As a teenager of 14, he had a brush with death. A serious chest surgery in 1950, one that required dozens of blood transfusions. Young James lay in a hospital bed, wired up to machines, feeling a mix of fear and gratitude. Doctors worked frantically around him, rotating bags of donated blood to keep him alive. In the middle of it all, the antiseptic smell, the beeping monitors, a thought formed in James's mind. Although he hated needles, he vowed, "If I survive, I will repay this gift." That promise would shape the rest of his life. 4 years later, when James turned 18 and was strong enough, he kept that promise. He walked into the local clinic, heart pounding, and offered his arm. Despite years of needle phobia, he nodded at the nurse and squeezed her hand. It was time to give blood for the first time. This was an act of gratitude, not yet knowing how it would change the world. In the 1,950 donated blood was still a lifeline to people like James. But a scientist's challenge was also finding a better way to use donations for mothers and babies. As James continued donating, medical researchers realized something remarkable. His blood contained a rare antibody against the rh-D antigen. Why was this so important? At the time, doctors were struggling with hemolytic disease of the newborn, HDN. In simple terms, if an H-negative mother was pregnant with an H-positive baby, her immune system could attack the baby's red blood cells, causing severe anemia or even death. Before the 1,960, about half of those affected babies did not survive. But a solution had been found. A medicine made from donated blood plasma, called anti-UAD immunoglobulin. By giving this injection to the mother during and after pregnancy, the immune attack could be prevented. It turned out James's plasma was perfect for this role. In the mid-1960s, researchers at the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital in Sydney discovered James Harrison's unique blood. He had already been donating whole blood for over a decade by then. One doctor recalls asking James to participate in an experimental anti-ATD program. James grinned and said later, "They asked me to be a guinea pig, and I've been donating ever since." Without hesitation, he switched from whole blood to plasma donations, understanding that even more lives could be saved that way. Picture that lab in 1967. Scientists painstakingly creating the first doses of anti-UAD and the very first injection, given in 1967 to a pregnant woman, contained a drop of James's life-saving plasma. For the next 60 years, James made that life-saving trip every 2 weeks. He would drive to the donation center on the New South Wales coast, where nurses and staff greeted him by name. They knew he would pale a bit at the sight of the needle and squeeze the orange stress ball provided in his hand. He always turned his face away when the needle went in, flashing a little grin to the staff to hide any fear. Through it all, he kept making good on that 4-year-old vow: give back, give back, give back. Over time, the effects of his contributions grew enormous. Australia's Red Cross Lifeblood explains that more than 3 million doses of anti-ADD containing James's antibody have been issued since the program began. And because roughly 17% of pregnant women need an anti-ADD shot, the Blood Service estimates, Harrison has helped 2.4 million babies in Australia. In other words, every pair of needles that took his plasma potentially helped thousands of mothers welcome healthy children. One nurse would later say tearfully, "Every ampoule of anti-UAD ever made in Australia has James in it," and she cried just thinking about it. James himself never felt heroic. When reporters asked if his decades of donations made him brave or special, he simply laughed and replied that it wasn't courageous. The life you save could be your own. In fact, his own daughter, Tracy Mellowship, said he was very proud to have saved so many lives, without any cost or pain. He always insisted it didn't hurt at all, and he was just doing what anyone else could do. Yet there was nothing common about James. Over 1,100 times he sat in that chair, once a world record, until policy forced him to stop at age 81 in 2018. Today, his 1,173 donations are marked by silver balloons at his final farewell. Each balloon a donation, each one a life touched. During those 6 decades, recognition found him despite himself. Australians nicknamed him the man with the golden arm, not because he was a boxer or gangster, but because his arm delivered life-saving gold in plasma. In 1999, he was honored with the Medal of the Order of Australia, OAM, for his service. In 2005, he earned a spot in the Guinness Book of World Records for most plasma donations, a title he held until 2022. Yet for all the accolades, the quietest moment was in 2018. On his final donation day, families brought along their smiling babies to thank the man who had given them life. Nurses held babies aloft, and one woman whispered to James, "It's all because of you." He merely gave them a weak smile, squeezing the little baby's hand. Even now, he felt no pain, just a full heart. James's legacy goes beyond the numbers. It's in the children who called him Grandpa, because he made their existence possible. His own daughter and grandchildren are alive today because of the anti-UD he provided. Tracy remembers telling her own children, "Thanks to Dad, I then gave birth to another healthy boy." And said it makes James happy to know the many families like ours who existed because of his kindness. These are lives that would not be here without him. In one sense, every one of those 2.4 million infants owes their life, in part, to James's selfless choice. Of course, James was just one piece of a bigger story. His blood works in laboratories now. Researchers at the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute and Lifeblood have been racing to replicate his rare antibody synthetically. They hope one day even mothers in remote villages, without access to donors like James, can get the same medicine. And his story inspired more people to roll up their sleeves. The Australian Red Cross notes that so few donors qualify for anti-UD that they keep hoping. Perhaps there will be another James Harrison among them. James himself said his only real talent was to be a donor, but the world sees it differently. Every year, thousands of new volunteers step forward, driven by tales of that older man with the golden arm who refused to stop giving. Finally, let's reflect on what James's life means. He was no king or general or Nobel laureate, just a regular guy who decided to honor a promise. By fate, he was born with a body that had exactly what was needed. By choice, he used it for the greatest good. When asked about the blood trade or profit motive, he scorned the idea. He believed true donors were volunteers with heart, not profit. And though he is gone, James Harrison's memory lives on every time a pregnant mother receives her safe injection and every time a family welcomes home a healthy baby. The chairman of Lifeblood said it best, "We'll never see his kind again." In an age of grand technology, sometimes the greatest miracle is human kindness sticking to a promise. So, what does it take to save 2 million lives? Perhaps only an ordinary man's extraordinary dedication. James Harrison never wore a cape, but with one final breath he left behind a legacy that's almost superhuman. His story reminds us, even the quietest act of giving can echo through generations. As you listen to this, remember his simple motto, "It does not hurt, and the life you save could be your own." And know that one person can change the world, one drop at a time.